Thank you very much for coming today. And I get the honor of talking to you all when you're eating your lunch, which has its benefits. It has its, of course, risks that you might decide that you want to take a little nap. And that's okay. I won't take offense. A lot of the subject matter that you're going to be hearing today is complicated. There's a lot of controversial things, and people have a lot of questions. One of the things we did is I went ahead and I supplied you with a very comprehensive set of slides that you can refer back to. And these slides really talk about what the Catholic Church has set as its beliefs and its rules regarding the circle of life issues. Physicians and the church, we all go together and we do our work and we combine it in something that we refer to as bioethics. And the reason is that we have found out that religion and medicine are very much intertwined, and they follow a lot of distinct values that are generally in common more than they are not. When you look at the original Hippocratic Oath, you will see that when a doctor is taken that oath, he specifically sets certain guidelines that go along with the bioethics that I'm going to present to you today. A couple of them says that the physician promises to never give someone a poison that will end his or her life. The physician will never give a woman a poison that will induce her to give up a life within her. And there's a lot of talk about in the Hippocratic Oath about respecting the dignity of the person that he or she will take care of. And these are the things that we don't really think about. A lot of the new physicians take that oath, and in some cases, those oaths have been modified because there's a lot of issues there that are controversial. But if you look at the original one, this is what it talked about. And so today I'm going to go and show you a little bit of how religion and medicine are combined and why it's important for all of you to be familiar with some of the things that we need, the issues we need to deal with, and how we should face them. And don't be afraid to ask us, those of us that are knowledgeable in this. Remember that not every doctor is Catholic or Christian, and not every doctor has these values. So sometimes a doctor may be very good in what he or she does, but they're not familiar with the things that you believe as Christians and as Roman Catholics. So let's get started. When considering a medical treatment, we say, science without conscience can only lead to man's ruin. And this is something stated by the Congregation of Doctrine of the Faith. And many of you here remember Second World War, the Nazis in Germany, and how they experimented on people without a conscience. And we know the terrible things that were done in the name of science, and we don't want to go there. What is ethics? Ethics is a term that a lot of physicians, as well as a lot of other people, rely on, that politicians, supposedly, professors in different universities. What do we mean by ethics? It's a set of moral issues or aspects such as rightness. And this is described in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. So we say ethics describes rightness. And we think of this as a term that is used by everybody, secular or religious. However, when we look at what that means, when we talk about ethics, and I think I went ahead a little bit on this slide. I'm having some issues, Michael. Let's see. Okay, let's go back. Definition of moral. It is relating to the principles of right and wrong in behavior. That means that we do things where we express about something that is moral, or we confirm something that is moral, or we sanction something that is moral. That again is in the dictionary. It's a very widely used term. We as Christians establish our moral beliefs, or we follow our moral beliefs because we believe in the protection of human life from the beginning to natural death. In other words, we say from the womb to the tomb. We believe that human life must be respected absolutely from the moment of conception, not just the moment of birth, but the moment of conception. And human life represents a personhood which has inalienable rights in conformity with the plan and will of God. And in our case, we believe that every life is created in the image and likeness of God. We hear this over and over again, but what does that mean? In the Catechism of the Catholic Church, a book about this thick, if you take the small paperback book, we have different things that we know and understand and establish as the beliefs of the Catholic Church. And if you look in specific areas, you see that, again, the Catholic Church states that human life must be respected and protected from the moment of conception. This is what we as Catholics believe. Also, science and technology, by their very nature, require unconditional respect for fundamental moral criteria. What does that mean? They must be at the service of the human person, of his inalienable rights, of his true and integral good, in conformity with the plan and the will of God. So they're talking about the intertwinement of science, technology, and with our Catholic beliefs. This is stated over and over again. So religion and medicine are constantly referred as a team or a cooperation. Why is that important? Why is the dignity of man important? And why do we refer to the person as being somebody important? We refer to the dignity of the human person in the sense of understanding what personhood is. It involves an understanding that a person is an individual of a rational kind, and that's what differentiates us from animals, because we actually rationalize. We can make deductions. We can come to conclusions. Our minds think differently, and that's why we are different. I'm sure if there was a friend here that was from PETA, they would be starting to challenge me right now, but this is true. We love our animals, but we care for them. They love us. It's unconditional love, but they do not rationalize the way we do. Personhood does not depend on the functional abilities only, what we can do, but the innate capacity for certain functional abilities, what we are, what our essence is. And the definition of personhood, therefore, relies on the emphasis of that rational capability. Understanding this, we need to then go and say, what is the role of the church? The church has a very specific role, a very important role. It has to support the healthcare ministry. What does that mean? I, as a doctor, have to understand what the church stands for, and it has to be very specific, and we have to have a discussion with clarity. The church must collaborate with those who work to improve the health of the congregation. It must provide clarity with certain issues, certain situations that are problematic before and after birth. It is okay for a priest to come and tell a doctor, this is what we do or do not believe, or a minister, a deacon. Why? Because you understand what the church's beliefs are. But that minister must be taught what medicine teaches, what medicine involves, and how it is related. So it has to have an intertwining, a relationship that involves both of them talking, communicating, and seeing what they each involve and believe. So there's definitely a commitment in the education of the clergy of these moral issues as well as the technology. The church has to do this. And I challenge the church clergy all the time when I talk to them, because I want them to explain to me what they believe and how it relates to what I understand and what I've been trained to express. And when they are wrong, believe it or not, they sometimes don't think they're wrong, but they are wrong, and I have to tell them that they are. Father, I'm sorry, wherever you are. I know you probably don't want to hear that, but I have wonderful discussions with the clergy, and we always come to the same conclusion, that we are partners. In whatever issue we are discussing, we are partners. So what are the principles of the Catholic bioethics? We incorporate the guidelines of the church, and we look to see what is our moral obligation as we practice medicine and as we provide treatments for different people. What are the three major moral obligations? And these are the ones that are very specific. And if you think back to these, refer back to these, every action that you take, that we take, must involve consideration of these three things. Number one, do not commit evil. That seems easy, right? But it's not always that easy, because sometimes in the attempt to do something that we think is merciful or kind, we're actually committing evil. And that's what we should not do. Prevent evil out of charity. What does that mean? Well, perhaps you want to help somebody because you think they're hurting. In the process of relieving that hurt, you have an action that you do that actually creates an evil. And an example, a person wants to not take a medication because that medication makes them feel uncomfortable or has side effects, but you know that the benefit of that medication might be something that might make their quality of life better. And instead of convincing that person to take it, you say, oh, it's okay. And that's a very, very simple example. I'm going to go into more important examples, but it is the same idea of trying to alleviate someone's suffering and in a sense create an evil. And this was what you did out of charity. The other thing is we need to consider correcting others out of the charity that we are taught to give. And correcting others of their wrongful beliefs are things that we must do. If a person believes, for example, this controversial thing, that abortion is okay, then we have to convince them why it's not okay, why we as Catholics believe that. And that's not always easy to do, but it is one of those moral obligations. And like that, there's other issues that we must address. How do we determine if an action is moral? Well, there's three elements. What is the object? What is the reason? What is the intention? And what is the circumstance in that specific situation? When we consider again if something is moral, we have to consider the principle of double effect. This is complicated for some people to understand. And trust me, when I first heard about it, I didn't understand it. As a matter of fact, I had to take a year-long course to really understand what the principle of double effect is. And in simple terms, we say that it's in trying to achieve a good, we recognize that sometimes the good comes with an unintended bad effect or consequence. When that happens, if your desire to do something good is the principal reason you do something, then you're okay in doing it. And let me give you an example of that. A woman is pregnant. She discovers she has a uterine cancer. And in order to treat that cancer, to save her own life, she must take a medication that's going to cause her to lose or cause the death of her baby. She takes and she has 6 other children at home. If she doesn't take that treatment, she's probably going to die, and by the way, that baby will probably die. In some cases, like in St. Giannamola, the baby didn't die, but she did. But in many cases, the baby would die with her if she doesn't take the medication. But if she takes the medication, she survives, but the baby doesn't. So in that case, the intent is to save her life, and that is a good intent. The bad consequence is the baby dies. But that is a good example of the principle of double effect. It's an acceptable treatment. She does not have to die. But we accept the death of the baby, and we do not criticize or hold her accountable for that. And these are the things that we can say are things that, as we must address every difficult issue that we have to face. Can you always come to the same conclusion by yourself? No, you must. Sometimes you need help. And we, again, look at each action with the following conditions. And these conditions are always summarizing the same. The good is intended, the bad is not intended, but the bad could be a result. In the face of death, For many times, hope seems lost, and the church witnesses that God has created the person for eternal life. Each person is equal in dignity to any other. We must consider the inherent dignity of human life. And this is when we address end-of-life decisions, we must address the fact that every person has a value, and this is because we are human, we have that rational ability, and we have the issue of personhood. Life is a precious gift from God, and humanity is given the stewardship over life. We must protect it. We are not owners of our lives, and therefore we do not have absolute power over life. This is what we believe as Christians, as Catholics. We have the duty to preserve life, to use it for the glory of God, and the duty is not absolute. In other words, we may reject life if the prolonging of that life is giving us a burden that is not a burden that we are obligated to accept. And these are the things that are important when we discuss situations such as suicide, euthanasia, or assisted suicide. What is suicide? You take your own life. What is euthanasia? Someone else determines that a certain group of people do not deserve to continue life because their value is determined by several issues. Issues such as their ability to work, their ability to provide something for society, and their ability to just not be a cost to society. And assisted suicide is generally done by physicians or other healthcare workers where we initiate the onset of a death by the use of some kind of medication or intravenous or injectable or oral. We shorten the lifespan of a person. These are never morally acceptable. And if you look at what medical people say when they take their oath to practice medicine or to follow the principles of medicine, we know that assisted suicide is something that is considered prohibited, but yet we do it. What does the church teach? Church teaches, I am going to go over 6 principles that the Catholics should know, and these are the basic ones that are in your handout, and these are the things that we always refer to when we talk about end-of-life issues, circle of life issues as in medicine and religion. Human life is always good. The dignity of human life comes from whom? From God in his image and likeness, from Jesus. His redemption was given to us. He died for our sins. And it is something that we should cherish from the beginning. We respect the good of a person's life by not killing and by not offering, and by offering care to continue a healthy life. We are given a specific commandment, thou shalt not kill, the 5th commandment. How much more clear can that be? We are told to revere life, love life, and foster it, because it is a gift from God. The underlying evil at issue in the assisted suicide, as I have referred to, and also in euthanasia, is the belief that human life is no longer a good, that it has no value. It has no value, and that value is given by what that person can do or provide or perhaps work to provide, to offer society. And a life would require greater acceptance, love, and care, and is considered useless or held to be an intolerable burden and is therefore rejected in one way or another, and that is why that life is not worth living. Persons who commit suicide, however, are often said to be going to hell. They're damned to hell because they've taken their lives. And that's what we believe if a person is conscientiously understanding that taking that life is done for a selfish reason. However, when that person takes his or her life for a reason that perhaps was not due to a conscious effort, that person still has the ability to go to heaven. A lot of people have asked me that. Can my cousin, who was a schizophrenic and jumped off a building to kill himself, is he damned to go to hell? No. That person was disturbed. That person was ill. The church believes that those people were not responsible for their actions, and therefore these people do have an eligibility to enter the kingdom of God. And if they're lucky enough to get Father to come and give them the blessing as they're jumping off, I think that they would be luckier. But as it is, you can't always do that. All suicidal expressions that are conscious are the ones that we're talking about. The ones who really think through it and say, life isn't worth living. I don't have the reason to continue, and I'm just going to continue and go and kill myself. And we talk about people who are psychologically depressed because they are ill, they have a terminal illness, because the chemotherapy they're going through is too burdensome for them, and they go forward and they take something that will enhance the death. And in that case, it's a conscious effort to stop the suffering, and that again is what the church views as not the way to do it. So, but in answer to those that are ill, yes, they can go to heaven. The church believes that we are not required to sustain life by avoiding death at all costs, since life is not an absolute good. Allowing death to come naturally rather than fighting it with aggressive, burdensome measures is actually something that we may value as important. And it may make way for a serene Christian holy death, as it is called. Hospice and good pain management are also something that the church agrees to. And because these are good and they follow Christian values, they respect the lives of the dying people, and they should be encouraged. But the thing that we must watch out for in the case of hospice or palliative care is that the purpose of hospice is to make that person comfortable. The purpose of hospice is not to enhance the death. How many times have you heard of people entering I would say the terminal portion of their lives? They go into hospice and 3 days later they're gone, right? Why does that happen? Well, in the name of making people quote unquote comfortable, people are given higher and higher medication to make them comfortable, to put them to sleep. And eventually you go across that little bit that tosses them into permanent sleep. And we know as doctors that you can have someone be comfortable, keep them conscious, and they don't have to die right away. They can continue to be enjoying a little bit of the family and protecting that life. But unfortunately, some of our medical professionals feel that they can enhance the death by making them comfortable and giving them lethal doses. So as Catholics, we are obligated that when we have a family member who is close to being dead or is terminally ill and they're in hospice, we have to be vigilant that they are given doses that really make them comfortable and not doses that are going to throw them into permanent sleep or death. What is death? Death is natural, inevitable end of biological life. And we talk about death, total death, brain death. I hear a lot about brain death, and you will hear a lot more coming up because the laws regarding brain death are changing. And the neurologists are arguing over what is really brain death. And I have to tell you that usually they say when the EEG is flat, people are dead. And that usually looks at the front part of the brain, which is the cerebrum, or the first part, which we all talk about, the big part of the brain. But nobody talks about the brainstem, which is back here. And the interesting thing about the brainstem is it functions to create things like your menstrual cycle, let's say, or it talks about growth and development of other organs. And a lot of times when they talk about brain death, it's like conscious death, but let's say someone is unconscious and seems to be in a coma, but is continuing to have menstrual cycles. I'm talking about women because I'm a gynecologist and I do a lot of that. So to me, that seems a sign of life because you're still going through that. And we have seen that these people can actually get pregnant and have a pregnancy because that part of their body is still working. They're not conscious, but they can. This other part. So are they really dead if that part isn't working? No, it's not. The person's not dead until the front part and the back part, the brainstem, are both gone. So when we talk about death, there has to be a conscious effort on the work of the physicians to prove that all of the brain is not functioning. And if it's not, that person is really not dead. So there's a lot of talk about defining this and how we're going to determine it. So you will always see a lot of discussion about that. But know that the Catholic Church believes that until the entire brain is dead, you're not dead. And that's important because we also consider that people want to donate their organs. So there's a rush to get you before your brain is completely dead to get those vital organs. And there's a fine line as to whether or not we should rush your death to get those organs. So you'll see a lot of discussion. And always when you see this, and it's a family member, you must always remember that the church believes that we should wait until the person is truly dead before we rush into that other donation. Okay. When we look at medicine, medicine is rapidly advancing with a lot of advanced medications, treatments, and we say that when people are given the advantage of living longer, productive lives, and we have all these advances. However, there are some disadvantages. Some of these advances present a burden. Some of these advances create a life schedule that is almost too burdensome for the person to follow. For example, let's talk about a simple one, dialysis. It seems simple to go to dialysis 3 days a week for 4 hours, be hooked up to a machine, but some patients who undergo dialysis really have a hard time. They're there for 4 hours, they're bored to tears, they're cold. After dialysis, they feel weak, the muscles hurt, other parts of their bodies hurt. It takes them a good 3 or 4 hours to recover. That's 7, 8 hours of a day, 3 times a week, where they feel miserable. And perhaps they don't have family members that will come visit them on the days that they're not in dialysis. They may not be able to drive. And this is something that they're given, quote unquote, extension of life, but the life may be one that is just not one of any quality. So what do you do in that situation? Well, the Catholic Church says that if you have a treatment which is reasonable and doesn't provide a burden on you, you can continue that treatment. But if it provides something that is burdensome to you, then you don't have to accept it. And how do they define this? Well, they say that we can use ordinary and proportionate means to preserve one's life. And these proportionate means are those that are in the judgment of the people, offer reasonable hope of benefit, and do not give you an excessive burden, and does not provide an expense on your family that causes them to have a problem in taking care of the family. For example, case of dialysis. Dialysis is not covered in whole by your insurance company or whatever money that you have at home. So in treating you for the dialysis, you have to withhold groceries from the rest of the family. You as the father of the family, the mother of the family may say, you know, the burden on the family for me to continue this treatment may not be something that I wish to continue. The church says that's reasonable because you just withhold that treatment and you wait for whatever the God says is the rest of your life. And they say, and the church says, that this is okay. Because now you're choosing something that is not proportionate to your life. So when we look at proportionate versus disproportionate, obviously disproportionate is the opposite. We want hope of benefit, it's commonly used, not too difficult, reasonably simple, and pretty much not a burden. The other is just the opposite, excessive hardship, pain, cost, and several issues. And again, when this becomes a question, we again discuss it with the people that are trained in this. We don't make these decisions on our own. We talk to the doctors, we talk to our clergy, and we look for guidance. And one of the things that we consider basic or proportionate is hydration, nutrition, and shelter. A lot of people argue that when a person is in a coma, they should not have hydration and nutrition. The Catholic Church feels very strongly that that is something that is non-negotiable. We do not starve each other. We do not enhance death by starvation. And we keep patients comfortable, sheltered, We protect them. We don't put them outside in minus 10 degree weather. We protect them at home, keep them warm. This is basic things. But what we don't do is we don't necessarily have to keep them on artificial ventilation, dialysis, blood pressure maintenance. I'm not talking about your daily blood pressure medicine. I'm talking about IV blood pressure medicine that is given continuously to keep your heart working. That's in an ICU. That's what we're talking about. And other things like heart-lung that are outside the body. These are the things that we consider disproportionate. These are the things you are allowed to refuse. Your quality of life does matter. But the desire to end a slightly burdensome life, which is otherwise well tolerated, that you have to consider something that you must continue. You can refuse extraordinary means, and that's okay by the Catholic Church. We're not free to neglect ourselves. We must accept food, nutrition, and but we don't have to accept the other things. I'm going to skip a couple of these because once again, I've already talked about the burdensome versus the benefit. But I want to say that burdensome treatment, in conclusion, is accepted when death is imminent, the death is unavoidable, the patient is allowed to die, and the person is allowed to die when it's a pathologic condition. These are things that are set aside by the Catholic Bioethics Center, accepted by religious as well as the medical doctors that are Catholics. And let's see, I want to go over a little bit more about euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide. And what are these? These are bringing about natural death, and these are looked as mercy killings. And the church views this as absolutely wrong. And why is it? And that is because God is looked as the Lord of life, and no one may take the life of an innocent person without opposing God's love for that person. Again, human life is entrusted to a person, and this is according to God's plan. Suicide is wrong because it is considered a form of murder, your own self-murder, so to speak, a refusal of love of oneself. You've started to hate yourself because now you're diabetic, or you have had several heart attacks, or you have a cancer and you're disfigured because of the different surgeries you've had. And there is a denial of your natural instinct to live. And the other thing that's important is that euthanasia, when we look at it, it's a practice of intentionally bringing about death in order to relieve pain and suffering. Physician-assisted suicide is the use of medical professionals to do this. And what has always been wrong is that a physician or medical person has vowed to take care of people, to help them in prolonging their lives in a comfortable way. And when you decide instead that the value of that life is no longer there by your own decision, your own giving value to that person, you then take the role of being better than God, better than even the person himself. And this is not good. And what's bad about this is that it's done in the name of mercy. It's done in the name of decreasing the burden to society. And it's decreasing the value that God has given that person, his moral value and his life value. It also does do something which is bad, is it makes the family and the caretakers not value the life of the people around them. They show that they take away the ability of your surrounding family members to show their Christian love for you. I talked to a young group of people one day, and we were talking about physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia. And I said to them, why do you think that this is a good thing? Because a lot of young people feel that this is a good thing. We shouldn't let our older relatives suffer. We shouldn't let people with cancer suffer. Why are we prolonging their lives? And they all raised their hands that they felt that that was the way. I said, okay, well, let me talk to you about this. I picked out a guy named Adrian, and I said, Adrian, You look like a nice young man, handsome. You're going to a big event at school, and all the girls look at you as such a cute guy, and you think you're really popular, and that's great. And I go, you are a good-looking guy. And I said, but your grandfather is at home, and your grandfather is sick in bed. He's in a lot of pain. He has cancer. And there's no one to take care of him that night. Your mom has to go somewhere, your dad has to go somewhere, your other siblings, and the only person that is available to take care of your grandfather is you. But you need to give up your night at that dance. And I know that Maria is coming over there dressed in her best hot dress and everything. You want to see her. But your grandfather is sitting in that bed. But your grandfather was the guy that took you to school every day and showed you how to kick that soccer ball. And your grandfather taught you how to build that wooden bench. And your grandfather needs you, but you want to go to that dance. Do you want to sacrifice that dance for your grandfather? And he looked at me and he goes, yeah, sure. I said, that's the point. You taught Adrian how to give up something for someone he loves and someone who loves him. And that is the thing that we need to understand. Just like Adrian, all of us, when we care for someone we love, we express to them that which we are supposed to express, that they have a value. They have a value to us today as they did before. So when you, as you get to the end of life, you say, my life isn't worth it, you have to ask yourself, am I teaching my grandchildren, my children, the right thing? Am I telling them that I don't consider my life as worthwhile enough, and therefore they don't consider my life as worth anything? Or should I just be around, continue to love them in the best way I can, and let them show their love to me so that they grow and they become unselfish and they learn that the value of life that the church protects really has a meaning. So when you, as perhaps older people we have that obligation, and the younger people have the obligation to show that love. We must demonstrate that we show our love by giving them the opportunity to grow and show their love for us. So what we then say is that the physically disabled person has a value to society in ways that are not always tangible, in ways that are not profitable in monetary terms, and we are not expendable because we still have the value and we promote that value in many moral ways. So as I've told you, it is bad. Euthanasia is bad. It's bad for doctors. We're taught that we don't really care. We're taught that we can kill, and we shouldn't. But we should focus on palliative care. We focus on the symptoms. We focus on the cure. We focus on the comfort. We show that the community is there to support all the people, and that we see that the person does not have to be terminal. The person has to be valued. And this stems from the collaboration, not only of the church members, the parish members, but the church and the people in medicine. And so in conclusion, I also have to say that hospice, as I've said, is wonderful, but hospice under a good surveillance and under good rules and regulations will give us a benefit, but if they are left to their own devices, hospice organizations will do the opposite. And I'm going to end here, because I think I could go for hours and hours, and I hope I haven't bored you. I tend to have a lot of information, but I'd like to end here and take questions. And I welcome any question, and I don't care how controversial, and I'm happy to deal with them. So please, thank you very much, and I appreciate your attention, and I hope I gave you some information that you liked.
Mayra, you are awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've got a burning question I was going to ask about quality of life, objective medical definition versus subjective subjective feeling by individual and family. I don't know if there is an answer to that, but can you, I was a little confused by one thing. Your number 3 said belief that human life is no longer a good, and that's why euthanasia is not right. And then in your number 5, not required to sustain life since life is not an absolute good. Can you clarify that? Because I'm confused.
Maybe give it to me in 2 questions, okay? And then I can go back, so, because that is complicated.
Yeah, quality of life first.
All right,
Is there a medical definition versus anybody's subjective feeling about what is quality of life?
When you talk about quality of life in medical terms, okay, and depending on who you talk to, the quality of life depends on the ability, well, it's a good quality of life if it requires minimal intervention to keep you comfortable, functional, and happy, okay? So that is the medical definition of quality of life. Now, a lot of that becomes, that's objective, and we say if your blood pressure is good, if you're able to walk, if you're able to feed yourself, you have a good quality of life. Now we go into what we call your subjective quality of life. You may not be able to feed yourself or walk or necessarily turn yourself into bed, but let's say your conscience is there, you're awake, because a lot of people with ALS, that's their problem. They're functionally awake, but they physically cannot do anything for themselves. That quality of life is measured by that person and by the family. If the person can smile or can give some kind of evidence that no matter how difficult it is, that person is still enjoying the comfort of the people around them, the loved ones, that quality of life exists, and that is a subjective. So we as a family have to assess whether or not that person feels that the quality of life is still there and valued. A physician may say, well, that person really doesn't have a good quality of life. We tend to be a little bit more critical if we can't achieve perfection in a person, if we can't get you back to your normal state. But we also have to accept that we can't always do that. Now, if that person decides or is so burdened by the fact that type of life where they just can't do anything is no longer something that they can accept, they may show you signs that they are losing that sense of a good life. But you still are obligated to feed them and hydrate them. And at some point, their natural tendency, like the ALS person, to not be able to breathe will drop them into a death that they will achieve on their own, and you do not have to go to the next step and put them on the ventilator. You don't have to do a tracheostomy. That's the thing. So that's how we determine where the subjective and the medical objective is. Hit me with the second one. Is that good enough? Okay. Yes.
As we talk about this DNRs, does that not relieve the physician of a responsibility that many of them would be unwilling to accept? Because you're asking that if medical care will not prolong my life, then do not resuscitate, do not intubate.
Yes.
Are they obligated to carry that out?
Yeah, they are obligated. The
Legally.
question is, if a person gives a doctor or medical facility a DNR signed paper permission, are they obligated to follow that? Yes, they are.
Okay.
Because you have already stated that that is your wish. To go through a resuscitation, which involves the potential of a ventilator, IV medication, a lot of different things, they have to have your permission. And the one thing about DNR that I must say is this, or anything like that where you do extraordinary means, you need to tell your family, again, what you want. Because a lot of the papers that you sign when you go into a hospital that talks about what you want to have done, it's not clear. And it says that you want no life-sustaining measures. Well, a life-sustaining measure of a ventilator that may be temporary, because a lot of things you go on a ventilator for a short period of time. People with COVID went on a ventilator for 6 weeks, but yet they survived. They're out walking. I mean, if you give a paper to somebody who is a hospital administrator, they're going to take it to the full extent of, let me just not give you the ventilator. But if your family member knows, no, we mean not permanent, or we don't mean this, or we don't mean that, you need to educate your spouse or your children on what you really feel is something that you want for them to do. Because a lot of times their confusion is on what you want versus what is practical for the hospital and what they interpret as your paperwork that you sign on admission.
We've got time for one more question.
Are you aware of a directory or organization of Catholic doctors that can be used for referrals or to find one?
We have a Catholic Medical Guild of Dallas. It's cathmeddallas.org. If there is a place to leave a question there, it just so happens my husband's president. He looks at all the questions. And he is such a type A, as anybody who knows him knows, his name is Jeff Thompson, that he will research the question you have and find you the doctor. So until he's not president, you have a really good resource there. And he's certified as a bioethics person too, okay? So, cathmeddallas.org. Okay? If anybody has questions, I will take them in the back later on, okay? Happy to do that.